Radish, as many know, there was that recent assassination of that American political commentator Charlie Kirk, and there's lots of outcome from that action. And one is this, that what many people noticed, that there was lots of this kind of internet celebration about death of someone who was not anyway violently attacking anyone. Okay, and one thing what people are very sensitive and careful not to touch is that if you see those celebrations, that most of them are women or feminine men, about six to eight roughly, are either woman or visibly feminine. And I was thinking a little bit touch this from the perspective of yoga psychology, and then also from the perspective of Vedas and Puranic tradition. Okay, so according to yoga psychology and traditionally how it's taught there's the bhava faculty of the mind, and then when there's the Purusha Shakti, main bhava faculty of the mind is separated from the tarka, which is the middle part of the intellect, on faculty of intellect, logical intellect. And women, these are very closely connected, which means that emotions affected the intellect, and intellect affected the emotions more directly with those who have feminine subtle body than those who are men, which means that a woman has that prone to become traumatized when they intellect, reason and logic is questioned, defeated or mocked, and that happens a lot. It happens in the spiritual circles, that it happens definitely in the political circles, and the problem with this is that it's more easy to fall into this kind of extreme situation, which means that, example, Bhagavad Purana is explaining that one shouldn't argue with the woman, because one cannot win in that sense, that more you win, more you lose, which means that if the female logic is defeated, because it's attached to these emotions, which means that they go more extreme to the other direction, and then it many times becomes this kind of emotional manipulation and labeling that someone is sexist or misogynist or racist. You can see that it's happening in the politics, it happens in so-called spiritual circles as well. So Bhagavatam explains that. And then Matsya Purana also explains that it's more harder to rise above one conclusion. One is trapped in that cycle of this intellect controlled by the emotions. Okay, and then that leads to this, that is kind of taking the vows, vratas, which are basically done with the Uttama Tarka and Karanadeha, which is the upper, little bit upper mid part of the intellect. Like when you take the vow, we make the promise, it should be bound with the causal intellect, Karanadeha, which means that even my emotional mind is telling me that I don't like to keep the vow, I don't like to keep the promise, but one is still keeping it. It's more easier those who subtle body is made of Purusha Shakti, made of masculine energy, which is the men. Okay, and woman it's more difficult to maintain because the emotional mind is binding this tarka, which means that promise is generally kept as long as one has feeling to do that. Okay, and this is example Garuda Puranas and Kanakya Pandit explains this as well, that one shouldn't put too much weight on the word of the woman. And remember, these are not now people interpret these as somehow misogynistic or sexist. No, these are very straightforwardly explained in the Vedas, maybe without sugarcoating, but one should understand that these are accurate, like descriptions based on understanding of that difference between the Purusha Shakti and Stri Shakti, feminine and masculine subtle bodies. So these are not, have nothing to do with some, hating the woman or something. This is just try to see the world as it is, okay? And because of that, we can see that there's many outcomes on that as well. That these like in relation keeping the vows, like statistically example, I saw some statistics from the America that 70% of marriages are broken by the woman, and I also seen it in spiritual circles as well, that feminine men and women, they usually give up their initiation vows more easily as well. When we don't want to maintain it anymore, then we don't feel like doing it. But that shouldn't be the reason that I don't feel like doing something. Many times we don't feel like doing things what we still should do. And that's why men are generally dying for the country, dying in the wars as well, because there's more stronger ability to maintain that promise even to the moment of death. Of course, nowadays testosterone is going down, and people don't have girls and boys don't have proper father figures in the home. Man becomes very feminine, and woman becomes basically very extreme with and opinionated, like emotionally traumatized in that sense. This is just consequence. This is just the result of that kind of emotional traumatization. Okay, and then we can see that the other differences between the masculine and feminine body, that the two sthai bhavas, the steady emotional moods, which is the rati and krodha, which is anger and attachment, they are in the like a man, they are more separated in that sense. One can create, like it's more easier to be more detached on that. See the distinction between the attachment and the anger, and women become more blind on that because they exist in the same faculty. Okay, and that's why it's explained. Example, the Brahma-Vaivarta Purana is explained that a woman, the heart is divided in that sense. Okay, which means that it can be same time very hard, like we can see, or very soft, which is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam example. Which means that one may be very soft and nurturing, empathic, vulnerable, same time, taking care of the family, taking care of the kids, sacrificing everything for the family and kids and the environment, which are very wonderful qualities if they are supported. Okay, or one becomes very wild and like a hard-hearted, celebrating some assassination of this politician, example, being happy because someone is murdered, or being selfishly just thinking, how about me, killing own baby in the womb, and just thinking that they cannot see that that's your responsibility to take care of your child. If you get yourself in that kind of situation, it's not about it's not only about what is convenient for you. People always take that rape and these kind of situations out on that conversation, although they are important things, of course, but they are only, in the developed countries, they are 2 to 5% of all, or abortions. So one should keep the focus on the main topic on this in these conversations, okay? And this kind of calling the people to racist and misogynist very easily. This is one example. So this, if women are properly protected, if women are properly protected in the society, they can develop better. protected from the men, protected from themselves, protect them from other women. They're properly guided from the childhood, as boys should be guided as well. So then it would be more easy for them to develop these kind of feminine qualities. But now they push all this social feminism, which is basically opposite, asking for women to develop these masculine qualities, and also that gender is just social construct which is not supported by yoga anyway. And what happens is that we just get this kind of hard-hearted individuals. And then the other last like a controversial thing is that there's example many texts say that women are less intelligent. Vishnu Purana, Padma Purana, Mahabharata, Shiva Purana. There's so many others like a text that are describing that. And where is that based on? From the perspective of yoga psychology, it's based on this because of this dynamic between the bhava and tarka, is that it's very difficult for intellect rise to that level of causal intellect. Causal intellect and viveka, that spiritual discernment. Causal intellect is important in the kshatriya dharma when one is engaged in the politics. One have to little bit be aware of that. One cannot be sentimental there, which means that politics, if one is on political position, someone is always getting hurt. You cannot save everyone. And if you try to be too soft there, like a viveka, one cannot see clearly that process of cause and effect. And it's not about just being idealist. It's about the minimizing the suffering, which means that sometimes it's done by causing the suffering, to minimize the suffering. And you can see that this is happening, especially on the left-wing politics, is that it's basically politics led by the woman and feminine men. And you can see that there is this kind of like a overly sentimental attitude, because the causal intellect is not really working there, and that's why there's lots of good intentions but very negative outcomes. Not to get deeper into that. And then the viveka is that spiritual discernment. One is able to discern, discern on spiritual topics. That's also affect that it's more difficult to be awakened for women, because that without the spiritual discernment, spiritual practice is very hard. It can be very difficult. Like we see all these questions about there's so many things that one should be able to take it and be able to discern what is sat, what is true, and what is asat, untrue, no matter do I identify with it or if I don't identify with it. Okay, so these are some distinctions between the male and female subtle bodies. Sri Radhesham.